welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about American Graffiti, the George Lucas film from, I think it's 1973. This was a film he made following THX, which was a massive failure. Even though it didn't cost much money, but it was like, it was barely released. And so, it was one of those films that it showed talent, it got him other job offers, but it kind of was not viewed as a big success because it lost money because it was too weird. So at this point, Francis Ford Coppola, who was his mentor, said, "You have to show human beings. You can't just do these cold things. You have to show that you're actually a warm person who understands people." So Lucas actually thought that was a good challenge to actually do a more humane film. So he's actually up for the task. Because obviously George Lucas, that's been a kind of problem in his career, in the sense of he loves the technology, he likes the stories, but sometimes the human side of it he finds difficult. You know, like he's not like Coppola. Coppola's strength is good. He's been good with actors and good with people in the film. Sometimes he can't organise it as well. Lucas always organises stuff well, but maybe the people side of it is less his thing. So it was I'm trying to embrace the other side of his character, and it was a big success. Now I watched the new 4K restoration. I saw it in streaming. I didn't see it on disc. Now this has been a very controversial one because it is not the best. It's not a very good transfer. It seems to be a problem with Lucasfilm specifically. I don't know if Lucas was involved that much in the transfer, but also knowing what happens with transfer, sometimes the director does a transfer, it looks good, and then when it gets mass distributed, it goes to hell. Like famously, when Friedkin did a transfer, the French Connection, there was a massive error on how they manufactured that transfer, and it looked weird. Never complained about it. And he said, "What are you talking about?" And then we saw it. He was like, "Oh, that wasn't what I did." So you're never quite sure. But Lucasfilm tends to have a bad rap, which is weird because he used to be really good at transfers. When George Lucas was in charge of Lucasfilm, the transfers were always good. He was always like ahead of the curve for making sure that the releases were always good quality. Like he was early on, he was a big thing about restoration, keeping films restored, keeping the elements together so it can be re-released so people can see them in the future. And Star Wars, when he was in charge, always had good restorations and good re-releases. There was also the special edition stuff, which is controversial, but he always made sure it looked good. And then as soon as he left, as soon as he sold the company to Disney, the quality wasn't as good. And Disney have a reputation of not being the best quality for like 4K. I think there must be there's a link there. Like putting money into actual restoration or putting money into make sure the restoration is pushed forward to this consumer. Something's obviously going wrong, because nowadays the Lucasfilm stuff, the new releases look great even if they're not really worth a damn for quality, and the stuff they should actually make sure looks good, the stuff that people like Star Wars, the original, the Lucas Star Wars, things like that, or American Graffiti, that stuff's not treated as well. And it's like, why don't you treat the stuff that people like well to start with? Make sure that's secure, and then you can do the other stuff. So it seems that there's a kind of it's just strange. It's like you're treating your actual important things like trash. I mean, the Star Wars 4Ks are not great. The prequel 4Ks are not great, especially Phantom Menace. This one transfers not great. It's like, wait a minute, you actually, the films that people want to see, the films that are better liked, are the ones you're treating worse. And the films that people couldn't give a damn about, you're treating better. It's like weird. So something's obviously gone wrong there. Hopefully they'll get it sorted. But that's me finishing the transfer stuff itself. I'm now going to the film. The film is terrific. American Graffiti, I managed to watch it projected for the first time. I've only ever seen it on TV before. And it's a really good film. It's really well made. And it was, and it's actually it looks, one of the things that looks effortless, but actually when you look at what they're actually trying to do, which is 4 different stories of 4 people in one night, where they start at the beginning, they get together, then they all split off and have their adventures. But the film always makes it feel like it's one film, because it's 4 friends, what they're up to, and it's actually them having 4 different stories and learning things and going through life, and then bring them all back together at the end. Which is it's a structure that Lucas used again for Empire Strikes Back. They only used 2 different characters there. And Darth Vader, if you want to add him, as the villains doing it. But I mean, basic structure Lucas likes. And in this one, it's not that plotty. It's actually the story of these different characters and what they're about. And it's all motivated by what they do and what their mistakes and their flaws. Everything is to do with the characters and their flaws. And trying to show what they are and show who they are. So there's not actually a strong plot element. And yet the film feels like it's just very naturalistic. You're never bored. It's always going in some direction. You always feel there's a direction to the film. And you like all the characters, all the atmosphere's great. And it's all about the atmosphere of this one night, of this society that is actually going to end soon. I mean, basically the film was made in the 70s, where this kind of cruising culture was gone for a decade before. This is what George Lucas grew up with, this cruising culture, because he grew up in California in the 50s and 60s, and he was a cruising kid. He liked cars, which you can see in the Star Wars films. He loves cars. And he understands the cars and the beauty of the cars and the mechanics of them all and how to shoot them. But he also understands the cultural side of it, of the different people in the cars, talking to each other, getting up to hijinks, and that's kind of the mating ritual of being in the car. So it's all about that. And Graffiti has a reputation because of when it's set, it's like, oh, it's an innocent version of what you get in like Dazed and Confused or something. It's not really. It's just, that's the culture then was more polite than what would come after. But the film was actually goes out of its way to show you this is a middle class town that is fairly well off, but there's lots of dysfunction below the surface that we see throughout the film. And it's hinting at lots of stuff going on below the surface and no one's looking at. So it's much more like everything's bubbling below the surface rather than being exploding out and being big melodramatic scenes. But it's also the stories gain a lot of power from showing you the kind of, not the nostalgia, just the sense of a time moving on, people moving on and not sure where their lives are going, and that's just a sense of, in some cases, melancholy. People are starting to realise their lives are not going to work out the way they thought. They had high expectations, but it's not going to work out. They're probably going to be trapped here, and this town they find boring. There's just a sense of the strength of the town of, yeah, it's something you know, but also the weakness is it's something that blows the hell out of you. And that kind of feeling goes through the film, which is something I think a lot of people responded to. So even though the film itself doesn't have like a linear plot line that's driving it forward, it has lots of stories that interact with other stories that don't get explored, but you get hints of them. And that's enough to keep the film going. The film keeps going back and forward, so you always have a sense of who everyone is. No one gets left behind for too long in the story. And it feels almost effortless, which I know is not the case, because there was spent a lot of time editing, getting it down, because there was a structure in the script that went almost methodically from one character to the other. And then when they put it all together, it was like, this is too long, it doesn't work, we need to actually adjust it so that these stories feel more natural, going against one against the other. So they spent a lot of time on that. And George Lucas loves editing, so he spent a lot of time, like months on that himself, trying to make sure it all worked, all came together. because it was more effort than it looked. And there was a sequel years later that never managed to pull off the same trick because a different director, and even though George Lucas was a producer, and he came in later wanted to try and sort it, this kind of film is not something that's easy. And it was actually a film, because it was so successful, it got mocked and underrated by the directors of the time. I mean, like John Landis said, he just parodied it in Animal House because he'd never really seen it on the big screen. Then he saw it on the big screen later on. He was like, well, that's a really good film. He never realised he'd just seen it on TV. I mean, seeing it on TV and seeing the big screen different. One of those films, the big screen makes a big difference. A lot of things that are probably not noticed become much more important when you see it on a bigger screen. Just the atmosphere of the film is much more apparent on the bigger screen. And certain things that might feel a bit sitcom-y, because, I mean, this is the film that inspired Happy Days. A lot of stuff there that felt very sitcom-y. When you see it on the bigger screen, it's much more slice of life. So it's a different feeling to it. I know Friedkin was a bit dismissive of the film as well, but he dismisses everything apart from his own films. So, I mean, he's like... In the 70s, Friedkin was a bit of a dickhead. Really. Good director, but, you know... someone who inspired hatred from lots of people is the best way to put it. I think he was pretty dismissive of people in a way that wasn't very nice. But so the film is about these characters floating through the early 60s. Vietnam is on the horizon. It hasn't really come to the fore yet. It's something that's there in the background, but it hasn't really come in. It's the bomb that's just about to explode over his face. So you have 4 different characters. You have Richard Dreyfuss's character Kurt, who's basically is a guy who doesn't know what he wants out of his life. He's a guy who kind of floats through life and never quite sure what he wants, and everyone knows him and kind of likes him, but he's kind of like this character who's hard to pin down. But Dreyfuss gives him a kind of giddy side Dreyfuss had at the time, this giddy kind of impishness that makes all that seem to work. It's the sense of, it's not a bad guy, he's just not figuring himself out. And he probably does more throughout the film, even though he's the most aimless, directionless person. He gets involved with... he goes to the high school reunion and then he starts smoking with his old teacher. He ends up getting involved with the crime side of the town where these gangs suddenly pull him into the hijinks. So you get a sense with him as he kind of sees that this town is not as great as it lets on. His story kind of shows you that there's a reason to leave. Like the teacher he talks to, you realise he's preying on these young girls to look up to him because he's a cool teacher, and it's not a healthy thing because he's a guy who could have left but never. Then he goes to then Dreyfuss meets up with an ex-girlfriend, and they're driving around there, and he annoys the driver and gets thrown out of the car. He's trying to find this dream woman he keeps on seeing through the town, but it's always like a metaphor for him to leave the town. And he gets involved with these shady kind of like teenage... Well, not a teenage anymore. These are guys who were teenagers now and in their 20s and are still doing this stupid hijink stuff. And he's kind of learning that he really needs to go. And throughout the evening, he learns that. And he's the one who ends up going out in the middle of nowhere and finding Wolfman Jack. Wolfman Jack goes through the whole... Everyone's listening to him. He's a pirate radio. They're all listening to him. He's like the big icon of the town, and Dreyfuss is the character who finds him. He goes on the quest and finds him. So it's Dreyfuss's character slowly learning he has to move on. So this is kind of the Luke Skywalker character of the film, but much more kind of realistic and messed up and not quite sure of himself, and he does some dickish things throughout the film as well. But you never take it against him. It's just like he's learning how to be a person, is the sense with this character. So that works. Then you've the Ron Howard character, who's the other one who's going to leave town to college, and he's a bit more conservative and much more outgoing, go-getting. I have goals for my life. Like, he understands where he wants to be, and he's been brought up by the town to go and do things, and he wants to leave this terrible town. But he's got a girlfriend who's Kurt's sister, played by Cindy Williams, and she's obviously more intelligent than he is, and she's here in the town, and they're having a breakup because he wants to see other people when he goes away, and he does it in the most horrible way possible. He's the typical teenage boy who doesn't understand emotions and what he's actually saying, and he doesn't realize he's basically breaking up with a girl without taking responsibility of that. And then he realizes he does miss her once everything goes to hell. But this section actually works better because of Cindy Williams. Ron Howard is an okay actor, but he moved into direction pretty quickly after this. And I think he probably realised he had a limited range as an actor. You know. And went off to do something he was more interested in doing. So Cindy Williams is kind of the person who's the better actor of the two, and she gives you a sense it's really her story, with him kind of being like it's meant to be the four boys story, but each story ends up dealing with women in different ways, and they get their stories as well. And this is a film actually it's fairly equal. It's like it doesn't see the guys as being all wonderful and all smart. It sees them as being very flawed. It sees the women as very flawed as well in different ways too. And it's like how they all interact. So in this story, the female character is kind of the prominent character, even though you're seeing it through the Ron Howard character's eyes. The camera always goes to her, and it's always about how she's reacting. She's the one who motivates the whole story, and she gives the best performance. You get a sense of someone who's much smarter than him, is much more capable than him. He's much more interesting as a person. And the funny thing is, Cindy Williams did not want this part. She wanted a different part. But she got this part and she made the best of it and did a great performance. It was just like, it's really good. And I think she's the person who drives this arc of that story. And I'm sure even Ron Howard would agree in that one. He's probably aware that he's the kind of lesser part of the two. Then you have Terry the Toad, who's the kind of geek character. Now, Lucas actually kind of said he kind of split, like, three of the characters were different elements of him through different periods of his life when he was growing up. The only person was the Ron Howard character who was not much like him, but the Richard Dreyfuss character was like him in some ways. The Terry Toad character was like him in his social awkwardness, and the John Milner character, who's the cool guy, was him for being the kind of guy who could drive, who was a good driver. So Terry Toad is this antisocial kid who is trying his best to be cool, but he always says the wrong thing. He's just nervous around people. He gets Ron Howard's car to look after because Ron Howard's leaving town, and he's trying to impress people. He ends up getting together with Candy Clark, who's this girl who's very much in the 50s look, but she's much more street smart than she looks. And they get up to lots of adventures, and they start to like each other. So even though he's lying his ass off, she kind of probably can tell he's lying his ass off through most of it. She kind of likes him anyway, and it's just their adventures. They lose the car and have to find it again. And they just start to get on. They start to become friends. They're just two characters who like each other. They get on well. And she kind of loosens him up in a way, even though he's still the same person. He's starting to develop a little bit in a sense of he's not as nervous around her. They try to get booze because they're too young for the booze. They'll try to find ways to get booze. They'll try to go and do different things. And it's just this sense of a kid who's trying to join the adult world, but he's not very good at it. And how he kind of hooks up with this girl who's better at it than he is. But they're both kind of in their own little world, their own kind of naive in their own different ways. But it's a very charming section of the story. And it's another thing, it's like, one thing Lucas did really well here was he had a lot of charming actors. Because Charles Martin Smith plays Terry, and he's got a kind of very natural innocence to him. And Candy Clark's a terrific actress, and they just bond really well as a pair in this. And he's very good with these actors who can keep driving the story even though there's not much story. Because you like the characters, you like watching them to see what they're going to do next. And he keeps the camera back and lets the actors kind of interact with each other, which a lot of directors don't do because they're trying to go to the next joke or the next bit. And Lucas actually kind of trusted his actors once he'd cast them to actually develop the characters and actually to film it and actually see who they are and let them be, just trust them. Which is the big thing in this film is you tell Lucas trusts his actors. The final story is Paul Lamont as John Milner, who's a guy who's older than everyone else. He's the king of the circuit, of the racing circuit. He always wins. He's a mechanic as well. He's tied to the crime section of the town as well. He gets in trouble with the police sometimes. Obviously steals things here or there. But he's trying his best to actually... He knows his time is passing. He knows the moment has gone for him. And he has to move on to the next section of life. And he's not quite sure what to do. And he's still hanging out with these kids who are younger than him, who look up to him. And he knows that's not good for me either. He's going around picking up girls, and that's not working for him as well. He's got this other drivers out to race him, played by a young Harrison Ford. And it's just this sense of melancholy with this character. And he gets stuck with this younger girl who's 12, 13 in his car for the whole night, played by Mackenzie Phillips. And that's a really funny thing, is he's basically the babysitter. So this macho guy son has become the babysitter. But by actually having him that dynamic, he brings the kind of human side when he actually talk a lot about what's bothering him, in the way he can't talk to other people, and he's still having to deal with her, and she's a little brat at times. But you do get a sense from this interaction that he's developing. He's grown up a little bit over time, and he's starting to sense he has to grow up and has to move on. And you just get through this story of these four characters who are just trying to find a way to move on. But you also get the atmosphere of the kind of town, the atmosphere of all these little clubs that adults have, like their moose club and things like that they find is really important. It's the things that people kind of make important to themselves to give themselves something to do in this town when there's nothing happening. You've got the kids in the cars trying to give them lives importance. You've got all these different people who have had makeups and breakups with their peers, who don't know what they want to do with life yet. Everyone's kind of in that phase which you get when you're about 17, where some people know what they want and other people don't. And there's a mix. There's some people who already realise they've been left behind by life and no one's that interested in them. They don't have much to offer. So you get a sense of different people, and the film is about the kind of highs and the lows of that night, but it's also a metaphor of like every night's got those highs and lows, and life has those highs and lows. And eventually, the only person to leave is Richard Dreyfuss's character. One Howard character stays with his girlfriend. The Milner character gets into a race and there's a crash. The other guy crashes, and Terry the Toad gets a little bit more self-respect by the end of the night. But as the film, you get like coders in the film when you find out that Dreyfuss character becomes a writer. One of Howard's character becomes an insurance salesman, which is perfect for him. Terry the Toad is missing in Vietnam, and Milner dies he's hit by a drunk driver, so he dies that way. So it's this sense of melancholy. I mean, you can see the influence of this film on Dazed and Confused, but also in stuff like Stand By Me, who had that kind of similar ending. And again, four characters. It was one of those films that was very influential. It was a big hit. It wasn't a film that created a wave of other kind of films like Star Wars, but it's a film that has been quietly influential over decades. And it's a really good film. But try and see it if you can on a bigger screen, because that's where the power really comes in this one. It's a good film on TV, but it works better if you project it, because the atmosphere of the film really comes through. So that's me for now. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you go and watch American Graffiti, because it's really worth it. Right, bye.